fucking much. Do not talk to me. I don't talk to you. Don't fucking talk to me. God, I hate you so fucking much.
You should have something to do with my
Shut the fuck
I
up.
certainly will.
Shut the fuck up. I hate you so fucking much. Do not talk to me. God damn it.
My mom's always been an open book. She'd always tell my siblings and I about her childhood, about growing up on the Jersey Shore, with her older brother and her parents. She's super social. My dad, he's always been very closed off. Used to be a goofball. It's really hard to get anything out of him. He doesn't like talking about his childhood or what he did in high school or talking about the past at all. He's a lawyer in New York City. His ideal day is walking my 2 dogs and listening to music. When this whole thing started, my dad tried bad-mouthing my mom all the time in front of my siblings and I. And I told him that we're not trying to take sides, and he just laughed and told me that I was on my mom's side. As a kid, I remember my mom would cook dinner in the kitchen, siblings and I would eat. My dad would come home from work, give my mom a hug and a kiss. He would go off to eat his dinner. My mom would clean up. But I never did see them eat together. When I was 15, after my mom said she wanted to get a divorce, she started sleeping in the guest room. And it's been 7 years now since she's been sleeping in the guest room. When I was 15, there was one evening when I was in the kitchen. I didn't have my phone on me, and I wanted to look something up on the internet. So I went over to my mom's desk, and her phone was open, so I tried to use Safari. I accidentally opened up all the tabs on her phone and clicked on the app that was right next to Safari, which was WhatsApp. And that immediately opened up to messages, and I saw that she was talking to a man that wasn't my dad. For a long time, I ignored my mom because I was so upset about what I'd seen. And I wrote her a letter saying how upset I was. And I put that letter in one of the books that she was reading in the living room. And so we had a confrontation, and we both ended up in tears. And she told me that it was nothing, but I knew that it was something. And it was something that she didn't want me to see. When I was 14, my aunt got married, and my whole family went to her wedding. And I remember the photographer taking pictures of everyone's family, of couples, and I never saw my parents take a single picture together, or even talk to each other, for that matter. When I was 15, this was during the month of December. On Saturday morning, I woke up to my 3 siblings crying, shaking me, trying to get me out of bed, telling me that mom wants to get a divorce. And I found my mom by one of her closets, and I could see that she'd been crying. When I was in 6th grade, I went to a John Mayer concert with my parents. I sat with my mom, and my dad sat in a seat by himself across the arena from my mom and I. At one point, I looked down at my mom's phone and I saw that she texted him, "Who the fuck are you dancing with?" And I tried to find my dad in the crowd across the arena, and I could see that he was dancing with another woman. At some point later on, I looked back down at my mom's phone and I saw that he responded, "What are you talking about?" So I tried to find my dad dancing with this woman in the crowd, and I could see my dad just standing there. Early on in my parents' relationship, my mom went to a holiday party with my dad and my dad's sister. At one point, my mom couldn't find my dad, so she went looking for him with my dad's sister, and they found him dancing with another woman. When I was 15, there's one day when I was on my iPod Touch, and I must have done something with iCloud. I went to iMessages, and I saw all of these numbers I didn't know, and so I clicked on one message thread, and I figured out that it was my dad, and he said, "I love you," to a woman who wasn't my mom. And I kept reading the messages, and he told this woman that my mom had seen these messages and that he wanted this woman to tell my mom that this was nothing. And so I went about this a little bit differently than I did with my mom when I found those messages on her phone. I said something pretty vague to my dad, saying that, "Oh, somehow iCloud linked up my iPod Touch with your phone messages." And he got really defensive, and that really scared me, so I didn't say anything else. From the ages of 16 to 17, I definitely tortured myself by going through old photo albums and looking at pictures where my parents were happy and smiling. And looking at these pictures always ended with me crying, just because they looked so happy and the situation was so different than it was in the past. Soon after my mom said that she wanted to get a divorce, I became very curious as to why this relationship didn't work out. And she told me that she kept pages hidden in her closet at the beach house, detailing the things that my dad had said and done to her. And so I really wanted to see what was on these pages. Recently, she sent me photos of all these pages, so I was able to see what my dad has said and done to her. Going off to college was nice because I was able to get away from the house and all the fighting going on inside of it. But I felt bad for my siblings because they couldn't leave like I did. My parents first met at a food court in Newark, New Jersey when they were both on a lunch break, and I guess it started up from there. 6 months into the relationship, my mom would go back with my dad to his family home in Maplewood, New Jersey. Every time she went over there, my aunt and my grandma would act pretty cold towards my mom, and she never knew why. And whenever my mom and dad would go back to the family home, he would always take a phone call, always answer by saying, "Hey, Duffy." And one day my mom asked him who Duffy was, and he told her that Duffy was his girlfriend, who he was dating in Kansas City, and they had been dating for 7 years. So upon hearing this, my mom was ready to leave the relationship, but my dad insisted that he loved my mom, and so he broke up with Duffy, and my parents stayed together. When I was 17, I was in the school choir, and I came back home from practice one night. I went into the kitchen, and I saw bowls thrown on the floor. Some of them had food in them. Some of the food was all over the floor. My mom was in there, and I asked her what had happened, and she told me it was my dad, and when he gets angry, he'll throw things, break things, throw stuff away. Sophomore year of high school, when I was 15, I was in a group meeting with the guidance counselors, where they talked to the students and I about applying to college and the Common App and all that stuff. And this was the Monday after I'd found out that my mom wanted to get a divorce. And so I'd been crying pretty much that whole weekend and even that Monday morning. And during the last period of school, I got called back down to the guidance office. So I went to my counselor's office and sat down. She told me that she heard about what happened at home, that my mom had called her and told her about the situation. Guidance counselor told me that this wasn't going to be easy and that this divorce could take a really long time. So all of that just made me cry even more. And thankfully, I didn't have to go back to any class after that because I was a mess. When I was 15, my family and I went to Costa Rica over winter break, and we rented out a house by the beach. So my siblings, mom and I would go to the beach, get ice cream, do all these fun activities. But my dad just kept to himself. He would only stay at the house and didn't do anything with us. The first weekend after hearing about this whole divorce thing come into the picture, my whole family and I got in the car and went to get a Christmas tree. It was the weirdest ride ever. No one was talking, and it was just so bizarre because my parents acted like everything was okay. For a long time, I asked my mom where she thinks it all went wrong. And when I was about 17 or 18, she told me that it was when she was pregnant with my youngest sister, and my dad came home from a concert one night with lipstick on his neck. The first time I returned home from college, freshman year, was for Thanksgiving break. And I remember sitting in the living room with a bunch of family members, sitting next to my youngest sister, and I was finally able to ask her how things were at home. And in the past, she never wanted to talk about it. She would just shut me out. So this was really significant because she was finally talking about it with me. But one of my family members interrupted, and so my younger sister and I never got back to the topic. For a long time, I didn't tell my friends what was going on. I was really embarrassed, and I thought that everyone else's parents were perfect. There was one day where I was at my locker, my best friend, and I finally told her what was going on, that my parents were going to get a divorce. And it was really hard to talk about at that time, so I started tearing up. And I knew that talking about this would get easier as time passed. When I was 19, my two siblings and I, we were finally able to all agree how messed up the relationship was. And it took so long for us to finally come to this agreement because we just didn't talk to each other. And I talked to my friends about the divorce, whereas my siblings didn't. They kept quiet and they try not to tell anyone. And to this day, I still don't know if my youngest sister has explicitly told anyone about it. On January 9th of 2019, my parents finally signed the divorce papers during my senior year of college when I was 21 years old.